Okay, now let's talk about level 2 leveled classwork in our classwork tutorial. So level 2, more often than not, that is the organizing of information. So level 1 is all about gathering information out there and using it for later assignments, later tests, later quizzes, everything like that. Level 2 is about organization. So the vast majority of level 2s are going to be graphic organizers. Man, I love graphic organizers, and you're going to love them too, I promise, eventually. So graphic organizers are going to look like this more often than not. I'm going to give you a cell, a process, a step in a thing, an anatomical region, an organ system. They are organizing information and topics that are more than just a vocab word, and you're going to describe them in verbal detail. And then you're going to use a diagram, which is a picture that is labeled with words. And then you're going to do an abstract representation. You don't always do an abstract representation, but it is going to be a part of a lot of our graphic organizers. So let's start. This is a poster that's available in the back of the classroom again, and it's also attached to graphic organizers in Google Classroom. This rubric is also available on the Google Classroom in the materials section. So if you need it, you can always reference it. So I'm going to describe it. So when we talk about structures, step and process, anatomical concepts, organs, whatever I've given you in the items section, you're going to use the textbook to develop a complete description of it. You could also use credible websites if you don't want to use the textbook. You could also use your level ones. You should. This should be an amalgamation of textbook, websites, and your own notes, which are created from the textbook and websites. These are written descriptions. I'm going to be honest with you. More often than not, these descriptions are right there in the textbook. You can just copy them. Now, have you learned if you just copy the descriptions? No. That's why there's other columns. And the other columns are going to require more than just a rote copying of the verbal description of that structure or process or concept, whatever we're describing. But they are a jumping off point. Feel free to do more. You can always do more. Then the diagram is a detailed diagram. More often than not, these are in the textbook as well. A lot of y'all like to just Google image search and copy that, and that is an option. You can use a credible website to help you with this diagram, but I'll give you a hint. I created most of these graphic organizers using the textbooks, so the textbook diagrams are going to be much better. Now, sometimes it's as easy as copying that diagram out of the textbook and putting it on your graphic organizer, but sometimes the diagram is smushed into one on the book and you need to make it 4 or 5 different steps, or even worse, it's 4 or 5 different steps and you need to smush it into one. Yes, yes, not only are you having to think, but you're having to use those thoughts to generate a product in the diagram column. Now, my favorite column is the abstract representation column. Let me see if I can move myself. Whoa. All right, so the abstract representation column, this is an abstract analogy, a metaphor, a simile that describes the main idea of the item. So in this example, I'm using the myosin-actin cross bridge in your sarcomeres of your muscles, the little grippers that grip and pull the actin filament. The thick filament grabs the thin filament and pulls. That's what allows you to contract your muscles, your skeletal muscles. This right here is an anatomical description using vocab words and diagrams and processes we're familiar with because we've done our level ones, because we've watched videos, read the books, we know anatomical terms. Abstract representation is for somebody who hasn't. So I'll do it a lot with you. And you'll do it too when you're trying to describe something to somebody who isn't familiar with the vocabulary and jargon that you are. You use other terms. You use things they're familiar with. You use things that you and that person have in common that you know they understand to a level where you can use those metaphors, you can use that representation to represent, to abstractly represent the main idea of the concept you're trying to get across. So for instance, in our example of the actin and myosin cross bridge interaction, I've created tug of war. These two people act as myosin, pulling on the actin filament. The thick filament pulls on the thin filament and contracts it, moves it, snaps it tight. And that is an abstract representation. Now, I've spoken it to you. The way that you do it on your graphic organizers is you draw and label a picture, and you are going to draw and label what it is, and then draw and label what it represents. I know it says you can always describe what you would draw. You are drawing, but if you feel what I mean by this sentence, labeled pictures are best, but you can always describe what you would draw, is if you feel like your drawing does not communicate, like your dog isn't quite a dog, you can label it a dog. You can say, this is a dog. If you can enhance your diagram with an explanation of what it is, that's fine. But it is a diagram. It will always be a diagram. You're going to draw the abstract representation, not the actual. This is a concrete representation here in the diagram. You're basically taking the diagram and creating a cartoon of it. Use things you like sports or another class or a TV show or a book series or music or cooking or something you're familiar and passionate about. Use that and just use that every time. Create a theme. Be the kid who always uses cooking as an example, because a lot of that can work. Be the kid who always uses football as an example. Be the kid who always uses this TV show as an example, and use it to explain anatomy, and it'll help you demonstrate your understanding. And you'll find that the best way to learn something is to teach it. And that's what an abstract representation is trying to do. It's trying to get you to take the description and the diagram that you've created with help from the book, and then the abstract representation is you alone. You are creating this to describe how well you know this structure, concept, or step in a process.